Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, June 21st, 2024. The conservative Faith and Freedom Coalition holds its annual Road to the Majority conference in Washington. We'll hear from the founder, Ralph Reed, and Republican Senators Joni Ernst and Josh Hawley as they talk about the November elections, the economy, immigration and border security, abortion, and foreign affairs. The Supreme Court issues a decision in a major Second Amendment case upholding a federal law that prevents domestic abusers from having guns. The Deputy Director of the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention will react, and we'll talk about it with The Hill's legal affairs reporter, Zach Schoenfeld. Vice President Kamala Harris speaks to the Unite Here Union Convention in New York City. Independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. posts a video on the decision from CNN to not have him qualify for next week's presidential debate. Congressman Bob Good, Republican from Virginia, says it could take a few weeks to determine the winner of Tuesday's Republican primary in his 5th congressional district. His opponent, State Senator John McGuire, now leads by about 300 votes. Secretary of State Antony Blinken thanks Romania for agreeing to send a Patriot air defense system to Ukraine to help defend against Russian attacks. The secretary met with the Romanian foreign minister in Washington. And United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres says he's profoundly concerned by escalating tensions between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. At the Faith and Freedom Coalition website under the About tab, it reads, "We believe that the greatness of America lies not in the federal government, but in the character of our people, the simple virtues of faith, hard work, marriage, family, personal responsibility, and helping the least among us. If we lose sight of these values, America will cease to be great." The website also says the Faith and Freedom Coalition is a national grassroots movement comprised of nearly 3 million members across the United States. Coalition is holding its annual Road to the Majority conference in Washington, and the founder and chair, Ralph Reed, opened today's session.
What this conference is about is not just the excitement and the enthusiasm that we're going to have as a result of such an extraordinary lineup of speakers, including tomorrow afternoon, the 45th and soon-to-be 47th President of the United States, Donald Trump. It's not really just ultimately about that. It's about the nuts and bolts that when we leave here, when we roll out of bed Sunday morning, we're going to be roughly 140 days away from what I believe is going to be an inflection point in the history of our country and one of the most important, if not the most important, election in our lifetimes. I genuinely believe, I mean this, I do not believe that America can survive another 4 years of Joe Biden. I haven't felt this way since Jimmy Carter was president. So we've got to do our job. We're going to leave here. We're going to knock on 10 million doors of Christian and conservative voters in every single battleground state. We're going to make 10 million phone calls. We're going to send 25 million get out the vote texts. We're going to put 30 million voter guides in 113,000 churches. And when we're done, you're going to see the biggest turnout of Christian voters in American history. And this time, there aren't going to need to be any lawsuits. We're not going to have to go to court, and we're not going to have to wait until 2:30 in the morning for Donald Trump to declare victory. He's going to do it at 9 o'clock at night.
Ralph Reed, the founder and chair of the Faith and Freedom Coalition, at today's conference in Washington. He created the coalition in 2009 as, in his words, a 21st century version of the Christian Coalition, an earlier group that he had founded. The speaker lineup today included several members of the U.S. House and Senate. Senator Joni Ernst, Republican from Iowa, spoke about the economy, foreign affairs, and abortion.
We have hardworking folks out there that can barely keep their gas tank filled. They have trouble putting groceries onto the table. And yet we have inflation raging and an administration that refuses to do anything about it. The world is on fire. Now, how many of you have served in the armed services? Thank you. God bless you, veterans. Thank you for all you have done. Now, when we have strength, we see a peaceful world. But right now, we have an absence of leadership in the White House. We have a feeble-minded and weak-kneed commander-in-chief that has allowed this world to fall apart. We need a replacement, don't we? So, okay, if you haven't noticed, and I'm sure you have, but the Democrats have absolutely nothing to run on in this election season, right? So what they're doing, they're resorting to fear-mongering as we're moving forward, and they are fear-mongering about Republicans and what we'll do if we're in charge of the Senate or we take back the White House. Throughout this summer, what we've seen Chuck Schumer do, you all know Chuck Schumer, right? Yeah, I laugh too. Chuck Schumer is putting up a bunch of show votes in the Senate. And again, tying on to that fear-mongering, he's saying that Republicans are radicals. Radical when it comes to life. Radical when it comes to our conservative movement. But you know what? And I know you feel this way. Republicans aren't going to fall for it. We're not the ones that are radical. The radicals are the ones on the far left. They are the ones that believe in abortion up to the point of birth. That's radical. That's what we should be talking about. We will all stand together and support life. And I know this is a crowd that is going to do that.
Senator Joni Ernst, Republican from Iowa, at the Faith and Freedom Coalition Conference in Washington. Senator Josh Hawley, Republican from Missouri, also spoke. He opened by reading from the Bible, and then he went on to talk about immigration and border security policy.
I wanted to, if it's all right with you, I wanted to just preach to you for just a second. Is that okay? I've got my Bible right here. I don't know if you've gotten time to do your morning devotion yet, but if not, here we go. You know, I was just reading earlier today, 1 Kings chapter 21. I just think that this is a passage for our time. 1 Kings chapter 21, I bet you know this story. It says, now Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard in Jezreel. Do you know this story? Naboth had a vineyard in Jezreel beside the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. Do you know where this is going? And after this, Ahab said to Naboth, give me your vineyard. Give me your vineyard, that I might have it for a vegetable garden. And what did Naboth say? Naboth said to him, to Ahab, the Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my fathers. This is a passage for our time. We have the most radical left-wing agenda in the history of this country, the most radical left activists in the history of this country, and what they are doing is coming to us and saying, give me the inheritance of your fathers. Give over the Christian foundations of this country. Surrender the soul of this country. And our answer to them is, the Lord forbid that we would give you the inheritance of our fathers. We will not back down. We will fight for this country, and we will win. Everywhere you look, this country is in chaos, is it not? Look at our southern border. That border is wide open. Every sovereign country in the history of the world has had a border that is enforceable, that says who belongs to the country, who believes in the country, who loves the country, and who does not. But our border is wide open. And what's happening? People are pouring across it. Just yesterday morning in the state of Missouri, Missouri Highway Patrol arrested 5 illegal migrants who had kidnapped a young girl from the state of Indiana, taken her across state lines. It was 2 in the morning, 2:54 a.m., that a Missouri highway patrolman pulled over these 5 migrants and rescued that girl. And that is happening everywhere across this country. Yeah, thank them for that. They deserve our thanks. Drugs are pouring into my state, every school in my state. You can go and buy illegal drugs. Where are they coming from? Across the southern border. stabbings, murders, Laken Riley. It's all too common. It's all too typical. And it is all because of Joe Biden and the radical left agenda. And listen, you and I both know why the border's open. The border is wide open because they want to tear down America. They want to change this country. That's what they're trying to do.
Senator Josh Hawley, Republican from Missouri, at the Faith and Freedom Coalition conference in Washington. A Newsweek article today reads that Senator Hawley is up for re-election this year in Missouri, and some Democrats hope they will secure a victory in the traditionally conservative state. Democrats appear likely to nominate Lucas Kuntz, a retired U.S. Marine Corps officer, to face off against Hawley in November, although the primary will not be held until August 6th. Hawley has emerged as a lightning rod for Democratic criticism due to his staunchly conservative policy positions on issues like abortion and foreign policy, as well as his actions surrounding the 2020 presidential election. Still, polls suggest Hawley is favored to win re-election against Kuntz in Missouri, a state that has trended toward Republicans over the last few decades. Article today from Newsweek. Senator Hawley talking about immigration and border security. That also came up today at a session at the U.S. Conference of Mayors annual meeting in Kansas City, Missouri. Gabby Pacheco, president and CEO of the Dream.us, spoke about DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program that just marked its 12th anniversary.
DACA really propelled and has been just such a success for our communities, for the individuals that were impacted by this. But unfortunately, as we know, today, no new DACA recipient, even if they are eligible, can apply for the first time. They could submit an application, they just not are going to get adjudicated. So there's about 90,000 individuals who applied for DACA, but their application is on hold in USCIS. And it's not because they don't want to adjudicate, but there's an injunction that said you cannot continue to provide DACA recipient or first-time recipients DACA. People are continuing to renew, and there was, as you heard, some backlogs because USCIS, and this, I do not work for them and I do not get paid, but they're not funded correctly. So whenever there's programs that they have to do and start getting work authorizations for other immigrants, et cetera, that creates a backlog and unfortunately affected DACA recipients. And we started getting a glimpse of what it's going to look like for our communities when DACA recipients don't have work authorization. So I know of nurses who had to be laid off. I know of teachers who had to leave the classroom and be put on leave, and they had to bring in a substitute teacher in the middle of the year because their DACA was not renewed. And so we know that the DACA program is in the courts. We know that it is likely, it is not certain, that the program might go in front of the Supreme Court. And we also know that what we have been seeing with other cases, that likely the DACA program is going to end. But I do want to say something, that the DACA program was never supposed to be a forever thing. It was a stopgap measure to be able to allow Congress to act. And 12 years later, crickets, right? I think it's really critical that we remind ourselves of that.
Gabby Pacheco is president and CEO of the Dream.us on a panel on immigration policy at the U.S. Conference of Mayors annual meeting in Kansas City, Missouri today. From the Washington Times, U.S. citizens don't have a constitutional right to bring their non-citizen spouses into the U.S., the Supreme Court has ruled. The court, in a 6-3 ruling on Friday, reaffirmed Congress's broad power to set immigration limits and the executive branch's role in carrying out those orders and deciding who can come. The justices had previously ruled that a would-be migrant lacks the constitutional right to challenge those decisions, and now ruled that U.S. citizens don't have the right either. The case was brought by Sandra Munoz, a U.S. citizen who argued she had a right to sue to get her husband, a citizen of El Salvador, into the U.S. The State Department denied him a visa because it suspected he had ties to the violent gang MS-13, based on 4 of his body tattoos. That was from the Washington Times. And another Supreme Court decision today, USA Today reports, the court upheld a law banning domestic abusers from owning guns, showing that a conservative court that has expanded gun rights also sees areas for limitations. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote for the 8-1 majority in a decision that faulted some courts for misunderstanding the court's recent moves backing gun rights. He wrote, "Since the founding, our nation's firearm laws have included provisions preventing individuals who threaten physical harm to others from misusing firearms." The case centered on a Texas man, Zachary Rahimi, who was involved in 5 shootings between 2020 and 21. Rahimi pleaded guilty to the federal crime of possessing guns while subject to a restraining order, but an appeals court threw out that conviction. That was from USA Today. The Supreme Court's decision in that case came just as a discussion was underway at the Aspen Institute in Aspen, Colorado, on gun violence as a public health issue. And you'll hear reaction to the decision from Megan Ranney, Dean of the Yale School of Public Health, and Gregory Jackson, Deputy Director of the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention.
Domestic violence homicide is the leading cause of homicide death for women, and the majority of those are firearm homicide. Again, thinking about kind of this room, chances are that many of us know someone who's died of firearm suicide. Chances are also high that many of us know someone that's died of domestic violence, firearm homicide. It's tremendously prevalent. And domestic violence is linked to lots of other kinds of gun death as well. It's linked to gun suicide, it's linked to mass shootings, it's linked to homicide, which is why I'm so thrilled that the Supreme Court upheld the current regulations allowing removal of firearms for folks that are under a domestic violence restraining order.
So that's breaking news as of this morning. The Supreme Court is allowing that law.
Today. It would have just undermined.
It's good to see them do something good.
Big win.
I don't know if you want to weigh in there too. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's huge because we know that there's a direct correlation between domestic abuse, access to a firearm, and gun-related death connected to domestic abuse. And if it wasn't for this decision, it would have stripped a lot of tools out of our toolbox. One major thing that the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act did was help clarify what it means to be a dating partner, but it also made gun trafficking a federal offense, and it helped us expand licensing of those who are engaged in the business. And this is important because we did a study, a 5-year study on gun trafficking, and found that the number one source of guns getting into the hands of domestic abusers that are prohibited are guns that are trafficked. So we went back, okay, where are they trafficking from? And they found that they were coming from unlicensed private sellers. So online sellers, gun shows, marketplace exchanges, but folks who are selling multiple guns at a time are the number one source for guns that are trafficked and ultimately get in the hands of domestic abusers. And so now we're prosecuting gun traffickers because it's now a federal offense for the first time due to this administration. We've actually prosecuted over 500. We have now required 20,000 unlicensed private sellers to become licensed. So that is the number one source. And now we're able to get to how these guns are getting into the hands of domestic abusers. But if that Supreme Court decision was different this morning, all those tools would be, we would be unable to use those. And we're proud of how we've been able to get to the source to intercept guns before they get into the hands of domestic abusers illegally.
Gregory Jackson, Deputy Director of the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention, and Megan Ranney, Dean of the Yale School of Public Health at the Aspen Institute in Aspen, Colorado. With more on the Supreme Court decision upholding a federal law barring people with domestic violence restraining orders from having firearms, joining us on the phone is Zach Schoenfeld, courts and legal reporter for The Hill. Thanks again for being on Washington Today. So you write that the court ruled that this law is consistent with its recent expansion of Second Amendment rights. Explain what's going on.
Yeah, this was the court's biggest Second Amendment case in 2 years. 2 years ago, the Supreme Court set out a new test for assessing whether gun regulations are consistent with the Second Amendment. That new test by the 6 conservative justices on the Supreme Court says that these gun control measures have to be consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulations. So you have to look for historical analogs in the founding era to uphold laws that are in effect today. So this was the first case now testing this new standard. And the Supreme Court reversed a lower court that had, under that new test, said that this federal law was unconstitutional. The Supreme Court said, under their new test, even this law can still be upheld.
It was an 8-1 decision. Who was the one, and what was the reasoning of the dissent?
Yeah, the one was Justice Clarence Thomas, one of the court's leading conservatives, which is striking given that he was the justice who wrote the court's decision in the case I was just talking about 2 years ago, the case known as Bruin. And so to see him saying that, the test that he authored 2 years ago, saying that this law does not comply with it, but today he found himself standing alone. All 8 other justices, his fellow conservative justices, the liberal justices joined with Chief Justice John Roberts, writing today's majority opinion, saying that this does comply with this test. So really a striking dynamic compared to 2 years ago.
So the first big test in 2 years, what's the future now for gun cases before this court?
Yeah, this case has been closely watched by advocates on both sides of the gun control issue for what it could mean not only for the future of this federal provision that bans domestic abusers from possessing guns, but what it could also mean for the many other gun cases going through the court system right now in the wake of the Supreme Court's new test. There's quite a lot of cases out there, but just to give you one example is the charge that Hunter Biden, the president's son, was just convicted on in his recent trial. A provision that there's a federal ban for drug addicts possessing guns. So that is a case, and the federal law there, as well as many others, has been closely watched today. So I think today probably not a good day for Hunter Biden, with the Supreme Court not seeming willing to extend the Second Amendment even further and strike down these laws.
We're talking with Zach Schoenfeld, courts and legal reporter with The Hill. So we're getting many decisions at this end of the term, the Supreme Court term. We're still waiting on some big ones. While we have you, what are those big cases still out there?
Yeah, the Supreme Court, they are getting towards their end. They've got 14 argued cases that they have decisions left in. Now, that it might be that some of those cases get merged together, so it might be actually less than 14. But in terms of what's left, I think chief among the cases that remain is whether former President Trump has criminal immunity for official acts while he's in the White House. This has big implications for the future of his cases, whether they can move forward at all. But also, of course, timing is key, with Trump using this immunity argument to try to delay his cases until after the election. So we're watching that. We're also watching multiple cases on social media, how far the government can go in regulating social media platforms. Also, another big issue is the power of federal agencies. The court still has multiple cases that could really claw back the power of the executive branch to enact regulations. So still, it's going to be an enormous few days here as we get to the end of June at the Supreme Court.
And when is the next day for decisions to be released?
The court has announced that they expect to release decisions next Wednesday. It seems that this will not be the last day, so I wouldn't be surprised if Thursday and or Friday also become decision days, because as I just said, 14 cases left. So still a lot to go, but just 1 week left now until the end of June, which is their self-imposed deadline to finish all their work.
Self-imposed deadline, has ever been that the cases are released beyond that?
There were some outliers during the COVID years when the court, had to basically shut down right in the spring of 2020, just like everything else. So I will say, other than COVID, they have not. But of course, there's nothing technically stopping them if they want to go into July, which they very well could, given how many cases they have left and just how big some of these cases are.
Zach Schoenfeld, courts and legal reporter with The Hill. You can find his articles at thehill.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Congressman Jared Moskowitz, Democrat from Florida, spoke about today's Supreme Court decision on preventing those who are adjudicated a risk to themselves or others having access to guns. He was interviewed on MSNBC.
Well, look, I think the Supreme Court got this decision right after the shooting at my high school, Marjory Stoneman Douglas. We passed the Marjory Stoneman Douglas School Safety Act. We did a number of things in that bill, but one of the things we did was red flag laws, risk protection orders. At that point, Florida was only the 6th state in the nation to do that. And since that time, in the 6 years that that's been in place, law enforcement has used risk protection orders over 12,000 times here in the state of Florida. That means law enforcement deemed someone a danger to themselves or a danger to others and was able to confiscate their weapons. They get due process. They get to go in front of a judge to show that, that they should get those weapons back. But this works. This is a tool that helps keep guns out of the hands of people who are mentally ill or guns out of the hands of people that are a danger to the community. And so I'm happy to see the Supreme Court allow this tool, say it's constitutional. We always believed it was. And now that it is, it's time for the federal government to act. It's time for Congress and the Senate to pass a federal red flag law. This will be a tool that communities can use to help prevent things that happen in my neighborhood, like a shooting at a high school. It will help keep suicides down. It'll protect our veterans. It will help people suffering from domestic abuse. And so I think the Supreme Court got it right. And I think now it's time for Congress to act.
Congressman Jared Moskowitz, Democrat from Florida, on MSNBC today. President Joe Biden with a statement about the Supreme Court decision. No one, he writes, who has been abused should have to worry about their abuser getting a gun. As a result of today's ruling, survivors of domestic violence and their families will still be able to count on critical protections, just as they have for the past 3 decades. Gun Owners of America, posting on X, we are grateful to Justice Thomas for faithfully applying the Second Amendment in this case. Difficult cases with terrible defendants like this require the strictest adherence to principle. We are disappointed to see the majority cave and uphold an unconstitutional gun control law. Washington Today continues in a moment.
C-SPAN's evening newsletter, Word for Word, brings you a recap of the day's most important events. Find out what happened on Capitol Hill, the White House, and with policymakers, all delivered straight to your inbox. Subscribe now at cspan.org/connect.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. The union Unite Here, posting on its X account, thank you, Vice President Kamala Harris, for addressing our members on the final day of our convention. In 2024, our union canvassers in battleground states, Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and North Carolina, are ready to do the work to re-elect the most pro-labor administration of our lifetime. It's up to us. Unite Here describes itself as a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. They write, our members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. Our membership is diverse. We are predominantly women and people of color, and we hail from all corners of the planet. Vice President Harris spoke to the Unite Here Constitutional Convention in New York City.
Because as we in this room know, when union wages go up, everyone's wages go up. When union workplaces are more safe, all workplaces are more safe. When unions are strong, America is strong. And President Joe Biden and I are proud to stand by your side. So together we have fought for affordable health care, knowing health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. Together we took on Big Pharma and capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month for our seniors. And now, because of our work together, 3 of the largest drug companies in the country are capping the cost of asthma inhalers from hundreds of dollars each to just $35 each. And we know how that affects so many of our babies historically, and how expensive those inhalers have been. And we are finally making it so that medical debt can no longer count against your credit score. Which means medical debt can no longer get in the way of someone's ability to get a car loan, to get a home loan, to get a lease for an apartment. Because I don't need to tell anyone here, medical debt. Well, most people come by medical debt because of a medical emergency. They didn't ask for it. They didn't save for it, and it happens. And then they're out tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the way it has been working is it can count against somebody's credit score. Well, your credit score is supposed to be a measure of whether you are financially responsible. It doesn't make any sense that you would cause somebody to take a hit to their credit score for a medical emergency, and that's why we're getting rid of that.
Vice President Kamala Harris at the Unite Here Union Convention in New York City. Independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is reacting to the news that he is not qualified for the CNN-hosted presidential debate on June 27th. CNN required candidates to get at least 15% support in 4 national polls and be on the ballot in enough states to reach the 270 electoral college votes potentially required to win the election. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. posted a video Thursday night.
It appears that both President Trump and President Biden are afraid to debate me, and their campaigns are colluding with CNN to keep me off the debating stage. Hi, I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and I'm running as an independent candidate for President of the United States. The 2 other candidates don't agree on much, but they do agree about excluding me from that stage. That's why the Washington Post reported on May 17th that, quote, Biden's advisors quickly let it be known that they had not agreed to any terms that could include Kennedy. The Post also reported that, quote, one of the CNN producers on a Wednesday call with Trump aides had explained at the time that, quote, RFK Jr. will not be on the stage, end quote. While I'm flattered to know that President Biden and President Trump are frightened by the prospect of debating me, shutting me out of that debate makes a mockery of democracy. It's not just about trying to silence me as a candidate. It's also an attempt to stifle the ideas that I represent that both of these candidates would rather not talk about. For example, the bloated $34 trillion national debt, which they both contributed to, the forever wars that they both support, the chronic disease epidemic that is debilitating our children and over which they presided, the toxic polarization in our country, which is tearing us apart and which both of them feed upon and profit from, and the corruption of the federal agencies, which neither of them knows how to stop, even if they wanted to. President Biden and President Trump know I'll come in with tough questions, which neither of them want to answer, and that's why they want to avoid debating me. Whether or not they succeed, I'm going to keep talking about these issues and making them visible to the American people, and I'm never going to back down. What I need right now is a megaphone to broadcast these ideas on and off the debating stage, and I need your support to get that megaphone. Please donate to my campaign as much as you can today. Let's show the Democrat-Republican duopoly that we're not going to be silenced. The election's only months away, so please donate now.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr., independent presidential candidate, posting that video Thursday night. New York Times reported this week that his presidential campaign raised just $2.6 million in May, a paltry sum that speaks to how reliant his bid has become on his running mate, the wealthy Silicon Valley lawyer Nicole Shanahan. Again, that was from the New York Times. And so the debate on CNN next Thursday will be between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. Donald Trump Thursday night recorded a video as he was flying on an airplane about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s exclusion.
I know that RFK Jr. wants to try and get onto the stage on Thursday, and I'd love to have him, frankly, because I don't think he's much of a debater, and he's got some very liberal, radical left ideas. But I would love to have him, but you have to get certain numbers. That was the criteria, and he's way below those numbers. He's not coming close. So I hope to see him up there someday, but it looks to me like he's not going to qualify on many fronts. But he'll be there, and, you know, they say he hurts Biden more than he hurts me. I don't know if that's true or not, but they say he hurts Biden because he's a serious left person. And you know what? If he is, that's good. I don't really care. I'm going to Cleveland. It looks like we're doing great in Ohio. We're doing great in just about every state we're in. Every poll number that's coming in is looking good. We're leading just about every poll on a national basis, also on a swing state basis. And I look forward to Thursday night. It'll be great. And again, I saw RFK Jr., nice guy. I hope he can debate, because I really think it would be a good thing to have him up there. I'd love to have him up there, but you have to do better than 6 or 7 points, like by about triple. And maybe someday he'll be there, but I sort of doubt it. Thank you.
Former President Donald Trump, expected Republican presidential nominee, posting that video on his Truth Social media platform Thursday night. C-SPAN radio and television will be simulcasting the CNN presidential debate Thursday, June 27th. Our coverage begins at 8 p.m. Eastern. The debate is scheduled to start at 9 p.m. Eastern, and then after it's over, we'll get your reaction by phone and social media. Story from AP, conservative Congressman Bob Good, Republican of Virginia, is asking for patience from the people of the 5th District over the coming weeks as he hopes the final ballot count from Tuesday's primary will allow him to fend off a challenger endorsed by former President Donald Trump. Good, who chairs the hard-right House Freedom Caucus, currently trails State Senator John McGuire by a little over 300 votes as elections officials finalize their vote counts and mail-in ballots continue to trickle in. McGuire claimed victory late Tuesday, but the Associated Press has not called the race for either candidate. In an email, Good's campaign manager, Diana Shores, noted that mail-in ballots arriving at local election offices by noon Friday still must be counted. Provisional ballots are also still being counted. That was from Associated Press. Congressman Good was on the Steve Bannon War Room podcast on Thursday talking about the state of his race.
There's 62,000 votes cast, tremendous high number of votes for a primary in Virginia. And we're separated right now by 300 votes, less than right around 0.5%, certainly within the margin that calls for a recount to be paid for by the state. And we're in the canvassing procedure right now. This is the process. It'll stretch out, started yesterday, mostly today and tomorrow, to be even into Monday, where you're trying to identify errors, mistakes in tabulation. You're looking at the provisional ballots. You're waiting for the final mail ballots to arrive, which are due tomorrow. They have to have been postmarked by Election Day. And you're trying to find those easy discrepancies where there's the clear mistakes that have been made. But we're meeting some resistance, Steve. We're meeting some resistance with those who are present on Election Day in the various counties and or registrar's offices. You know, we had one where they started 2 hours before they were supposed to. And for some reason, my opponent's representative was there, but we weren't notified they were going to start 2 hours early. And so obviously we're forcing for that process to start over. But we don't know what happened in the 2 hours before we got there. We've got another.
How could that? But hang on. Because we got to sort this out for November. This is the problem. Why? How do they start 2 hours beforehand? And do you have when you guys show up? Can't you go immediately to court and just throw the flag and say we got to stop this? This is what drives people nuts. How can that happen? And why would a Republican opponent want to do? Why, given voter integrity, who on earth that's a Republican would start 2 hours early and not wait for the other guy to show up? Who would do that?
Well, you're absolutely right that everyone should want to make sure that every legal, legitimate vote is counted, and only every legal, legitimate vote is counted, that we follow the intent of the voters to perfect accuracy on those who participate in this election, some 62,000 at this point, that the voter intent is reflected by the accurate tabulation counting of every legal, legitimate vote, and no illegitimate or illegal votes are counted, of course. And so we're working through that process county by county right now in the preliminary review. But Steve, we're going to have a full recount. We're going to have a full investigation. It's going to stretch out for a couple of weeks. We've got lawyers at the ready. Thankfully, a tremendous number of lawyers at our disposal, many who are willing to help us and are helping us. So we're working very hard to get to an accurate and true and fair reflection of voters' intent in the 5th District.
Congressman Bob Good, Republican from Virginia, on the Steve Bannon podcast War Room on Thursday. Story from HuffPost, Congressman Good, the House Freedom Caucus chairman fighting for his political life after a close primary, expressed suspicion Thursday night about several fires at polling sites in his district on Election Day 2 days earlier. Good, whose race is still too close to call after 3 days, wrote on social media that we had 3 fires on Election Day in 3 precincts. Does anyone recall even one fire at a precinct on Election Day? Wall Street today, the Dow up 15, NASDAQ down 32, S&P down 8. From Associated Press, the Biden administration on Friday thanked Romania for its president withdrawing from the race to lead NATO, saying the move would help ensure the Western military alliance stays properly focused. Secretary of State Antony Blinken delivered the message to his Romanian counterpart. Their meeting Friday at the State Department came just a day after the Romanian president dropped out of the running for NATO's top job, clearing the way for outgoing Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte. Secretary Blinken also thanked Romania for sending Ukraine a Patriot anti-missile system and spoke about cooperation between the U.S. and Romania to counter disinformation. Here's Secretary Blinken at the State Department.
Of course, we've also stood very strongly together in defense of Ukraine and against the ongoing Russian aggression. And here, what Romania has done from day one in making sure that Ukraine had the support that it needs to fend off that aggression is quite remarkable. And that's continued to this very day, including with the donation of a new Patriot air defense system, something that is in critical need in Ukraine. And we're very grateful for that. We've also worked very closely together on Black Sea security. And this, too, is an area where Romania has brought critical focus to the alliance, to a number of countries. The work that's been done to ensure that food products, grain, wheat, could continue to get out of Ukraine and feed the world, as it did before February of 2022, has been critical. And this, too, is an area where we will continue to work very closely together. We're also working together to advance progress in the energy sector. Romania is a leader in civil nuclear cooperation, and the work that we're doing together, indeed pioneering together, I think will be critical, not just to the United States and Romania, but quite literally to the world as we advance new technologies, including small modular reactors. We are coming together as well today for our strategic dialogue. We've now had over 25 years of strategic partnership. One of the hallmarks of the partnership, both through the alliance and bilaterally, is making sure that we continue to adapt and adjust to new challenges as they arise. And one of the most critical challenges that we face together, and that all allies face, and indeed countries in other parts of the world face, is misinformation and disinformation. A tool that's been increasingly weaponized, particularly by Russia, as it seeks to advance its interests. Just recently, thanks to very good work that we were able to do with Canada, the United Kingdom, we exposed a plot in Moldova with using misinformation and disinformation by Russia to try to overthrow the government. And one of the most important things that partner countries can do is to work together, both to share information about misinformation and disinformation, to share best practices, and to combine forces to combat it.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken at the State Department with the Foreign Minister of Romania. Story from the Jerusalem Post. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said on Friday he is profoundly concerned by escalating tensions between Israel and Lebanon's Hezbollah, and that UN peacekeepers are working to calm the situation and prevent miscalculation. Iran-backed Hezbollah has been firing rockets at Israel in solidarity with its terrorist ally Hamas since the Gaza war erupted in October, forcing tens of thousands to flee homes in Israel where political pressure is building for tougher action. That was the story from the Jerusalem Post. Secretary General Guterres spoke at the UN in New York City.
I felt compelled today to voice my profound concerns about escalation between Israel and Hezbollah along the blue line. Escalation in continued exchanges of fire and escalation in bellicose rhetoric from both sides as if an all-out war was imminent. The risk for the conflict in the Middle East to widen is real and must be avoided. One rash move, one miscalculation could trigger a catastrophe that goes far beyond the border and, frankly, beyond imagination. Let's be clear. The people of the region and the people of the world cannot afford Lebanon to become another Gaza. On both sides of the blue line, many lives have already been lost. Tens of thousands of people have been displaced, and homes and livelihoods have been destroyed. Bushfires sparked by explosions are further devastating communities and the environment. Unexploded ordnance and remnants of war litter the landscape. And these pose additional threats to people in both Israel and Lebanon, and to United Nations and humanitarian personnel. The parties must urgently recommit to the full implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701 and immediately return to a cessation of hostilities. Civilians must be protected. Children, journalists, and medical workers should never be targeted. And displaced communities must be able to return to their homes.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres speaking to reporters at the UN in New York City. Story at the Washington Post, a senior State Department official and skeptic of the Biden administration's bear hug approach to the government of Israel, resigned this week in a setback for U.S. diplomats pushing for a sharper break with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his far-right coalition, said three people familiar with the matter. Andrew Miller, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Israeli-Palestinian Affairs, told colleagues Friday that he had decided to leave his job. He cited his family, saying he had seen them sparingly as the 8-month war in Gaza has become all-consuming. Miller told colleagues that if not for those responsibilities, he would have preferred to remain in his job and fight for what he believes, including in those areas where he disagreed with administration policy. That story today from the Washington Post. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter Word for Word, and you'll get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend.